And so, it continues. Hello there, welcome back to Max's Writing Advice Q&A. In tonight's episode, I have another set of not so much mini questions, but a bunch of questions that share similar themes, and I just want to kind of tackle through all of them. As you know, every week I answer questions by viewers just like you, and I select them through a random number generator because it makes it the most fair. So if you have a writing question you would like to send my way, leave it in the comments down below. It's as likely to be picked as anyone else. With that being said, before I go on anywhere, allow me to give you the formal disclaimer, as always, that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as the ramblings of a silly writer who looks a little bit, or rather precisely like this. Alright, silliness done and out of the way. Let's take it from the top. We have a bunch of smallish questions to take care of, so let's take it from the top. The first question goes a little bit like this. When I was writing for NaNoWriMo last year, I just went crazy with description of the situation, of the feelings of my main character, of the setting, and when I read that again, I noticed that the description was distracting, or just too much. But the thing is that I like it. I think that is because I wrote it, but I totally understand why someone else would get bored. I am going to pick that story again for Camp Nano, and I would love some advice for A, not making the same mistakes again when it is too much description, and B, how on earth am I going to edit that? Well, before we go on anywhere, the truth is this, okay? Every writer is different, and every reader is different. What is too much for you may not be enough for other people, and ultimately, real talk here, you can't please everybody. I've talked about this in the past, but I feel that I would rather make a story that I am proud of. I would make a story that is entirely me and I enjoy and I love, even if it's weird and bizarre, mostly because I feel that I can commit to that a lot more and I can be more proud of that, but that's just me. Let's talk about more technical advice, because I don't particularly feel that like having too much description or adding the description that you like is particularly a mistake, but I do know how you can go about editing this beast. First and foremost, time and distance are your biggest friends. Grab this story, put it in a drawer somewhere, or leave it in a folder in your computer somewhere and let it sit for a while. A few weeks, maybe a month or so, maybe two. Let it sit. Let it create a gap between the version of yourself that you are going to be and the version of yourself that wrote that story. The main problem with editing a story right away after you wrote it is that you're so attached to what you did that, or to the emotion, to the time investment, because you think to yourself, oh man, like I spent so many days writing this story, I can't just cut this off or edit that because, you know, I spent so much time. Distance helps distance yourself from that emotional attachment, but it also allows you to be critical of your writing. I'm not talking about being harsh, I'm talking about being critical of what you wrote. One of the things that helps me the most is when I read something in my own writing when I'm editing, and if I read something that makes me react in a particularly negative way, I ask myself, if I had paid for this book, if I had picked it up at a store, or if I had picked it up online, would I let this slide? And the answer is generally no. When people usually talk about like editing, they talk about being like harsh or being like their worst critic, and I think that's not particularly wrong per se, but I feel that there's a different way of phrasing that, and I think that treating your writing as though it is someone else's writing can really help, mostly because everyone likes a particular type of fiction. Everyone likes their writing in a particular way, and when you look at your writing objectively and critically and you think to yourself, okay, well, if I hadn't written that, would I let this problem slide? And if the answer is no, well, go on and fix it. Again, as I mentioned, you can't please everybody. So you might as well go into revision to create the best story that you would like to read. And I think that more often than not, that makes for a better end product. Question the second! It goes a little bit like this. Hi, so I'm trying to dive into what is really my first go at editing a first draft of mine, and it's really hard for me to read through it without immediately going to make changes. But when I do start to make changes, I start taking the story in a completely different direction than it went completely, and then end up almost getting bored with it and wanting to start something else entirely. Do you have any suggestions to try to make the editing process more interesting or ways to stay focused on the plot? Thank you. Well, first off, I recommend you consider the answer that I just gave not so long ago, as well as the following tips. First off, as with any bad habits, you have to be honest with yourself and acknowledge when you are beginning to fall into those bad habits. If you believe that it is bad for you to be rewriting in the middle of editing, then don't do it. Realize when you're going to do it and stop. I know that just saying like stop and not do that is not really much help, but that's why I have more points to offer. One of the things that helps me the most with revision is going in with a plan. And I'm not saying like a giant big values or a system, but what I'm saying is you go into revision with something in mind. Revision can be incredibly daunting for people because it's like this enormous boulder. It's almost like the first draft, really. Like, this is this boulder of tasks and things that need to happen, and you don't know how to go about doing it. And, as with any boulders in life, breaking it down into smaller pieces will do wonders. Every time you do a revision pass, and by that I mean a pass in which you read the entire story, making changes or making notes as you go. Give yourself a goal. What are you doing here? Are you just cleaning it up so that it's actually in a good form? Are you looking for flow? Are you looking for character motivation? So you're looking for for holes in the plot. Again, come in with a goal. There are some really, really simple things that you can start out with. Clean the text. Make sure that there are no plot holes. And then make sure that the story flows well. Those first 3 things can elevate a first draft immensely. It goes from, being hardly readable, and trust me, everyone's first drafts are hardly readable, and it takes it into something that you can actually work with. Again, go into the revision with a goal in mind. What are you working on in this particular pass? Focus on that and take it one step at a time. Revision and editing is incredibly daunting, but one step at a time will take you there, I promise. Question the 3rd. This might seem like a strange question, but do you ever have trouble writing certain stories? Not because of the plot, but because of the genre? I am currently trying to write my first fantasy novel, but I'm struggling with it. Do you have any tips that will get me through it? It just seems too realistic for what I originally had in mind. I want it to be more like, well, a fantasy novel. Hey. Let me tell you a little secret, okay? Link closer. Genres don't exist. Genres don't exist. They are absolute nonsense. Genres are just boxes, categories that bookstores need to arrange their goods. Genres don't exist. One of those very good examples that I have that I keep telling people is that if Mary Shelley had written Frankenstein now, would it be science fiction or supernatural? Genres don't mean anything. There wasn't anything more liberating in the act of writing for me when I realized that there are no rules. Just recommendations. Simple as that. Writers go out there and tell you what works for them, and that's ultimately that. You, just like everyone else, you have the right and the ability to create your own writer's toolbox filled with the recommendations that you believe to be true. And you can break them, and you can mold them, and you can shift them. And just like there are no rules in writing, genres kind of don't really matter either. And also additionally, people feel differently about genres the same way that they feel differently about everything. What may be too realistic for you may just be fantastical for someone else. Instead of worrying about this, I would like to inspire you to just write the story you want to write. Write it without apologies, without hesitation, without doubt. Create the story that is truer to the kind of writer that you are. Simple as that. Just have fun. Just write and have fun. Seriously, that's the best. That's, in my opinion, the best way to go around doing things. Just have fun. As for the 4th question, it goes a little bit like this. When writing characters / situations / plots involved with sensitive subjects, like abuse or mental disorders, I get worried about it being seen as glorification of those things, which is really not my intention. How can I tell if I cross the line or go too far? An understandable question. I think that this is something that a lot of writers deal with, a situation that props up more often than not. I'm gonna give you my own checklist for how to deal with this, okay? Write the damn thing first, write the whole story. If you have concerns or problems, make notes along the way. You can make the notes in the text. I like to have an extra file or note in Evernote where I track all of the little things that need to be fixed or all the questions that prop up during the draft. Once it's done, you let it sit for a while, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, up to you, write something else, come back, pick it up, revise it, do a couple of passes like I mentioned on the previous answers, and then ask yourself, did I go too far? Am I glorifying it? Am I making it seem as though this thing is an awesome thing and I'm glorifying it, I'm making it seem like a cool thing that all the cool kids ought to do? If the answer is no, because you have just read it and you have a new eye and it's been a long time and you're no longer the person who wrote that story and you think that it's fine, go on, move on with things. If you think that you did, go back and revise it. If you're uncertain, well, there's a little trick you can use. Reach out to someone you trust, someone whose opinion you value, and share the story with them. Tell them to read it, or show them that particular segment of the story. They don't have to read the whole book if you don't want to. Reach out to them and ask them. Simple as that. You may be asking, oh yeah, of course, Max, that's easy. No, it's hard. I just did it recently. I wrote a story, and I was uncertain of the tone of the story. I felt that it was too dark, and that there was a harsh in a bad way contrast between the main characters and the darkness of the plot. And I reached out to someone whose opinion I valued, and they gave me feedback, and they eased my worries. And sometimes getting another pair of eyes just helps, period. Again, I know that it's hard reaching out to people, but if you go through that entire process and all of that distance and all of that work, and you still are uncertain, you don't have a clear solution at hand, reach out to somebody. Reach out to a friend, someone online who you trust, and ask them what they think. Again, reach out to somebody. Feedback can make a world of difference, I promise. And now, for the fifth question of the day, goes a little bit like this. Hey Max, do you have any tips for how to organize the writing/editing/waiting phases so I do not stay too long without writing? Well, a calendar is a really easy way to sort things out. What I recommend you do, and it's hard for me to talk about this stuff because it's so ingrained in the way that I do things that I forget that everyone doesn't do the same things. And I know that it sounds weird to say that, but like I've been following this same routine for years now, so it's so like ingrained into the way that I do things. But here's what you do. At the start of every month, you look at your calendar, you look at the things you want to do, and you allocate time for those things. You allocate time for writing, you allocate time for editing, and if you would like to, you allocate time for waiting. I generally like to not do the waiting and just write something else and just shuffle things back and forth. So again, look at your calendar, look at the things you want to do, allocate time correctly, and give yourself padding. Give yourself lots of padding for extra time. Do not over-allocate time. It's not going to work. I promise you right now. Allocate less work than more work, because you never know what can happen in life. You never know the random encounters of life that could be coming your way. It is better to allocate less work time and do more than over-allocating time and falling short every month. Now, as for a couple of extra tips, I like to do this planning session at the start of every month, but I also do a smaller, like 20-minute refresher or check-in at the start of every week to remind myself, okay, I allocated this time. Is the plan still set? Are things still working like I thought they would? Nothing else came up, life hasn't jumped on me or anything? No? Okay, we move forward. The main thing with doing these big planning things, and you could say that this is the thing that makes a lot of like New Year's resolutions fail, is that people plan, but then they never remind themselves of the planning, and they don't keep following up on the things that they wanted to do. At the start of the month, tell yourself, this is what I'm going to do. Add the padding to make sure that you're not overworking yourself or you're giving yourself unrealistic expectations. You know yourself, you know how much you can write, you know how much you can edit, and if you don't, well, give yourself a little bit of an average number and see how it works. Adapt as you go. Every week, check in with yourself. Make sure that everything is going according to plan, and if it's not, adapt. Create a system that works for you and move on from there. Remind yourself of what you're working on and keep moving forward. It's weird to talk about this, and I know that I just said this, but it's because like this is so ingrained in my system that I'm just like, I feel like I'm saying things that are super obvious, but for you it may not be. And I really appreciate questions like this, questions about technical things of the writing as opposed to the actual writing craft. I always love questions like this, and thank you for sending that question. And thank you to everyone who sent questions that made it to this video, and to everyone who has been sending questions recently. As always, if you would like to send a question my way, leave it in the comments down below. It may get picked on next week's video. I've been having lots of fun just kind of like getting through all these questions relatively quickly, but I do also want to hear what you have to say though. Do you have feelings regarding the questions that were answered today? Please let me know. Remember that ultimately, I'm just sharing my own point of view, and you deserve to also share your own point of view, so feel free to do so in the comments down below. For the time being though, I gotta get going. I wanna thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll see you on the next one.